Hey everyone, we're back in front of you for another episode of FineScale Modeler Weekly.
Indeed, and we've got some cool stuff to look at.
Starting with a kit which has been expected for more years than the actual aircraft was in service.
More than 15 years after it was first announced as forthcoming, here's Trumpeter's 1/32nd scale TBD-1 Devastator.
When it was developed by Douglas in the mid-1930s, the Devastator was an advanced aircraft, but it was outclassed by Japanese fighters pretty early in World War II.
Following the Battle of Midway, which saw only 6 of 41 TBD survive, the Devastator was withdrawn from service.
The big kit's fuselage halves are marked with recessed panel lines and rivets, while the wings, designed to be posed either folded or extended, have the Devastator's unique corrugations molded on. As with other TBD kits, those complicate sanding the leading edge seam. The separate control surfaces, fabric on the real airplane, have ridged ribs. Optional parts allow the flaps to be posed up or down.
The cockpit is on full display under the clear canopy with different parts given to pose it buttoned up or open. Masks are included. Underneath the floor is the position for the prone bombardier. His aiming doors can be posed open. Other cockpit detail includes bulkheads, seats, gunner seat and ring, controls, and instrument panel.
Inside optional cowls with open or closed cowl flaps, the engines feature 2-cylinder banks and halves, separate push rods, intake manifolds, and exhausts.
The Devastator can be armed with either a torpedo or a pair of bombs. Photo-etched metal supplies seat belts, torpedo fins, and more.
Decals and color diagrams show markings for 2 TBD-1s. No indication is given for the squadrons of either, but one is in pre-war yellow wing colors, the other in early war blue-gray over light gray.
Given how long we've waited for the model, I'm sure it will be very popular.
Yeah, and I understand it's selling well, so I expect to see a lot of them on contest tables in the near future.
From Greenhill Books via Casemate, we received this interesting book.
Rommel's Afrika Korps in color is exactly as advertised.
This 288-page hardcover is filled with true color, not colorized, photos of German forces preparing for the arrival in Tripoli and interacting with the locals. Subsequent chapters focus on Panzer Group Afrika, desert travel and operations, rest and recreation, and the Desert Fox himself. The color photos provide a wealth of info about camouflage and weathering for armor and aircraft in North Africa.
With more than 250 color photos, this is a great resource for modeling this theater of World War II.
Finally, this week we have something fun.
That's right, it's X-Plus Models 1/35th scale Jurassic Park Tyrannosaurus Rex.
While you can build just the T-Rex, the kit actually recreates the scene from the movie where Ian Malcolm draws the dinosaur away from the car with a flare.
As such, you get 2 different bases, one for just the dino, the other with part of the park road and spaces for the T-Rex and Malcolm.
The dinosaur builds from an internal support for the body that gets clad with various external parts with the sharp skin texture. Similarly detailed, the legs, arms, and tail build separately.
A focal point with its wide open mouth, the head has beautifully molded upper and lower parts, separate teeth, and tongue. Malcolm has a separate head and arm, and there are poles and wire to finish the fence. A plaque with the movie's logo finishes the model.
If you're a fan of dinosaurs and/or Jurassic Park, this is going to be a must-have kit.
And really, who isn't a fan of dinosaurs in Jurassic Park? I know I am, and I can't wait to get started on this thing.
True. Look for a review of the Devastator on FineScale.com.
It'll be right there alongside hundreds of other reviews and show galleries.
You know you like looking at photos of scale models.
Yeah, we do. And as well as how-to information and a whole lot more.
And slide over to KalmbachHobbyStore.com for tools and supplies, including microscale products.
FineScale Modeler Weekly, brought to you by HobbyZone USA, your source for hobby storage solutions, hard-to-find hobby tools, and aftermarket modeling needs. And by Cult TV Man's Hobby Shop, the place to go for sci-fi and fantasy kits, decals, detail sets, lighting rigs, and more. The selection is out of this world.
You building models this year? If you are, you're probably using glue. I'm using glue, and I thought I would share with you my top 5 picks for glue that I have at my workbench. I'm gonna start off with this right here, Tamiya Extra Thin Cement. Yes, indeed, I do like the Tamiya Extra Thin Cement. If you've been watching Tooling Around, already know, because not only does it have this really nice glass container that is really, really stable, but the applicator brush itself is just perfect for applying this thin cement to plastic models. Very accurate. Next up, liquid cement. In particular, Contacta from Revell. What I really like about this product is not only the reservoir for the bottle itself, really nice squeeze to it, I like the shape of it, but also this metal applicator, nice, fine, and it gets the glue exactly where it needs to be. Here's the other thing about this metal applicator. It will get occluded. So if it does do that on you, and like I said, it will, just go ahead and take a lighter like this and go ahead and burn that out. Just wait for it to cool off before you put any glue back through it, right? Wait for it to cool off to the touch. Clean off any sooty residue that you might have. And then you are ready to apply yet again. I really like Revell's Contacta. Next up, super glue. In this case, extra thin and medium gap filling super glues from Bob Smith Industries. I really like Bob Smith Industries products, and with the extra thin, what you're going to be able to do is just flow it right into a join where you want the two pieces to connect, and it's going to glue those pieces lickety split. No waiting for liquid cement or anything like that. Just a little bit and boom, within 10 seconds you're there. With gap filling super glue, just as it suggests, it will fill gaps. So that's useful if you've got a join where there might be a bit of a gap. You put this medium gap filling super glue in there. When it cures, then you can go back in and you can just sand it out, and it will be as hard as the plastic surrounding it. I really like both of these products. Now here's the other thing. You're gonna go and you're gonna find that you can buy larger bottles of these super glues. I suggest that you don't. These 3/4 ounce bottles are going to give you plenty, unless you are really running through super glue fast. I mean, if you are, more power to you. But I think under normal circumstances, a 3/4 ounce bottle of both of these is gonna last you just fine. The danger that you run into if you buy a larger bottle is that you're gonna get through maybe half of it. The tip is going to start to occlude, and you're going to start running into a problem where you're in a race against time for the glue itself to dry out, even if you are keeping it in a cool, dry place. You know what? 3/4 ounce bottles, that's gonna do you plenty. Next up, 5-minute 2-part epoxy from Bob Smith Industries. Why 5-minute epoxy? Because for me, typically I'm not building something that I require the strength that comes with either a 15-minute or a half-hour 2-part epoxy. 5-minute works just fine, and I don't want to be waiting around 15 minutes or a half hour before moving on from working with my epoxy. I used to be a firm believer in going out to the hardware store and just picking up a syringe of 2-part epoxy from like Gorilla Glue or what have you. However, what's really nice about the separate bottles of epoxy is that 1, they're easier to clean up, and 2, when you're mixing the hardener and the resin, it's just easier to control the amount of either that you're putting out into either your container or on your mixing palette. I don't think you can go wrong with this product. Lastly, good old-fashioned white glue. In other places around the world, known as PVA glue, I've just got Elmer's right here, and it simply does the job. You can use it, like dilute it down, you can use it to make tarps, you can use it to make flags, you can put ground cover down for bases and on dioramas. You can also use it to attach canopies, windshields, headlight lenses, any clear parts really, or painted parts to painted parts without the fear of your plastic cement eating through the paint that's already there. White glue is just a perennial that you should in my opinion, have at your workbench, and I always do. These are the 5 glues that I have at my workbench, and you should have at yours too. If you have a different opinion, you can leave those down in the comments below or send an email to editor@finescale.com.
So it's been a little while since we took a chance to answer some reader questions, so we figured it was as good a time as any. So what have we got?
Well, we've got 2 questions really, and then a comment.
Okay.
And we're gonna talk about here. So let's first start off with a question from a reader, Mike Riedeman. If I mispronounced your name, Mike, I'm sorry. But Mike wonders, what do you guys think of vinyl tires for armored car kits?
Well, Mike, rubber tires or vinyl tires on armored car kits have always been a bit of an dicey situation. I remember building some Dragon kits from back in like the late 80s when they first came out. And those things were notorious for splitting or dissolving and liquefying after they were on the model.
Sure.
Not a good time.
But that is old. That's old
school.
tech.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
old tech. And
The new ones are a lot better. They've changed the formulations, the plasticizers in the plastic, and so they're much better. And they are a legitimate type of tire that can be used in kits, as opposed to plastic tires. And I know some guys prefer them and some guys don't.
And that's just it. There are a couple of schools of thinking on whether to use plastic ones or aftermarket resin ones, or you go with vinyl tires. But I think for finishing purposes, vinyl tires, you can pretty much finish the same way that you would, for instance, with modern vinyl tank treads.
Right.
What would you use to paint
Like a
vinyl tank treads right now?
Acrylic paints, because they're going to stick better. I wouldn't use enamels. Enamels are notorious for not sticking to that plastic. But vinyl, you may want to coat it first with a clear coat to make sure it sticks. But otherwise, you should be able to finish them pretty much like any other kit part.
And so I know another question is about the seams that you're going to see in vinyl tires. So we have this tire here out of a Trumpeter M1070 kit, 1/35th scale. And you can see right there, you can see that there is obviously a mold line. Now for cleaning those up, there's a old trick that the Scale Auto guys do, and they just come in with a file and they just go ahead and sand those away, because even a new car driven off of a lot, the tires are going to be slightly worn. So all that's going to do is, when you come in here and file that, is that's just going to give you some natural wear, just enough to get that tread to lay down and disappear for you. Or not the tread, but the mold line.
Yes.
Then after that, weathering, you should be able to use pastels and other acrylic weathering products on it, and you should be good to go.
Yes. And on a military tire like this one, I would probably hit it with a flat coat before I hit it with the pastels, just so it gives more of a way for it to stick.
Yeah.
And you don't usually armor all your M1070 tires,
No.
Unless it's a parade vehicle, maybe. But if you're in the desert, they're just going to be dusty and dirty anyway.
So don't shy away from using black vinyl tires if they are provided in the kit. Again, everybody's going to have their own opinion on this, but if they're there and you want to give them a try, go ahead and do it. From Wade Middleton, we have a question. What is the deal with Tamiya and their F1 kits? They build the best 1/20th scale F1 models back in the day, but have not released anything new in the past 10 plus years. Only Ebro has the McLaren MP30 currently on the market. Are these new designs too difficult to replicate?
Wait, I think there's kind of a two-part thing here too. What I had always understood about the F1 kits that Tamiya had back in the day was that a lot of them used the same Ford Cosworth V8 engine, so they could trade that engine sprue between those various kits. Plus, F1 was pretty popular at the time. The car designs were different but similar and not terribly complicated, compared to modern F1 cars that are like so many little wings on them, and it's like an exercise in aerodynamics and fine tuning all that stuff. Cars back in the day had a back wing and a front wing, and that was about it. So they were much simpler, and I think that's part of the answer.
I think that's part of the answer. The other part of the answer, and I know this probably isn't particularly satisfying to hear, but that is, Tamiya is very deliberate in its product choices.
Yes.
Always with an eye first toward the home market, Japan. And you can see that in the new products that they bring out. Toyota cars, Subaru, Nissan. You can see that also with the armored vehicles that they bring out that are newly tooled, or the aircraft that are newly tooled. Very deliberate. And then in the re-releases as well. Home market first and everything else secondary. Right? And I think you have a good point about this.
The latest, one of their latest kits was that 1/72nd scale F-35A Lightning II, which has 2 decal options in it. One American, the other is for the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force. So clearly, they're marketing that aircraft at that home market as much as anywhere else.
So what's going to sell well for Tamiya in Japan? That comes first, and then all the other markets are secondary. So we don't have any answers for you as to how popular F1 is in Japan right now. Japanese teams, I'm not sure that there is one, or if there's a really popular Japanese driver. It's been a while since I've followed F1, so I'm not sure on those answers for you. But that's kind of, where we're at. One is that those older kits, Tamiya was able to get a lot of mileage.
No pun intended.
Or maybe yes, a lot of mileage out of those kits. And two, where is their home market at right now?
Right. And I think F1 is really popular in Europe, and that's why you're seeing Revell Germany, for example, doing
some of the more recent,
some of the more recent Ferraris and so forth that have that more modern car design.
Yeah. So Wade, there you go. That's our take on it. So our last is a comment that came through the FSM forums from a user, Ops32. And his is a comment about your editorial in the July-August issue of this year. It says, I don't think your definition of gatekeeping matches any in the dictionaries. Just because a few readers have opinions that differ from yours does not constitute gatekeeping. Also, the tone of your editorial was that only your opinions are the right ones. He goes on further, I almost threw the magazine in the trash. The only reason I didn't was because Tim Boyd had some articles in the magazine. However, I won't be buying any more of your magazines because the harsh attitude represented by the editor's comments. Look up the word gatekeeping. The editor is guilty of gatekeeping and he has closed the gate on me. Now I will go throw the magazine in the trash. There's a lot to unpack there. Before you get going, I did go look up gatekeeping, both in Merriam-Webster, and then I went out and just sort of looked at what the more modern usage of gatekeeping is. A word used to describe when someone sets a standard or limit on what someone must do to call themselves a true fan of something or someone. Right? That's kind of the modern take on what gatekeeping is. Right. And it really comes out of, for better or for worse, geek culture, right? With comics, with video games, with a number of these things. Any of these things where, these hobbies where people can come in and say, well, you're not really a fan because of X, Y, or Z, or you're not really a writer because you haven't done these things, or you're not really a modeler because you aren't hitting these particular goals.
Right. And that's what I was trying to get at with the editorial, and that was that there's this sort of thing that happens sometimes in the hobby where somebody looks at a model and says, well, you're not building aircraft or armor, you're building sci-fi, so you're not really a modeler. You're painting figures, so you're not really a modeler. If that's setting a limit on what modeling is. You're defining modeling by a narrow set of standards. And my point is that the wider we make the definition of what modeling is, if we include anything where you're making a miniature of something else, or a replica of something else, that's modeling.
Yes, and I think to kind of further your point here, it's not just when, say, one modeler goes and says, you're modeling this genre and I don't agree with it, so you're not really a modeler, or you're not part of the scale modeling hobby, you're something else. I think also we must be careful of, even within our own expertises, like if you're an armor modeler or a ship modeler or a car modeler, and if accuracy is your thing, that really drives you, that's awesome. That's how you derive enjoyment out of the hobby. But if someone else's, enjoyment comes from more about the assembly and the painting and less about making sure that everything that is on the model absolutely matches some reference in a book, they're still deriving enjoyment out of the hobby. And we have to be able to support that and not necessarily expect them to come on to, over to our side and go, yeah, I'm really making sure that every little detail is matching something that's in a reference. We need to be able to meet those modelers where they're at and say, are you doing it to, the best of your ability? And are you having, more importantly, a good time? Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, then we've achieved our goal, which is to pass on the hobby. And if, as with everything, your opinion as you get deeper into the hobby may change, right? So you may go from, I really, right now, for the next 10 years, I'm really deriving a lot of enjoyment about airbrushing and just having these things. Maybe, eventually, that person changes their view on it a little bit and go, hey, I'm really into making sure that the interiors are really super detailed. And I'm really into looking at references and the history of these things that I'm modeling.
Sure. And I think that's exactly where it needs to come down to, is you get out of modeling what you want to get out of modeling. And it's not for someone else to tell you whether what you're doing is right or wrong because of their own standards.
Ops 32 and anyone else out there who agrees with Ops, I'm sorry that you feel that we were gatekeeping you. We aren't. We welcome you and anyone else into the modeling community. Just come in, enjoy modeling, and do it the way that makes you feel good about the models that you're producing.
Build what you want the way you want.
Build what you want the way that you want. And don't let anyone else stand in your way of doing that. Well, whew, that was heavy lifting. That was some heavy lifting there at the end. Thank you for watching FineScale Modeler Weekly.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Had a little squeak in your voice.
Squeak. You've got to move it, move it. FineScale Modeler Weekly, brought to you by Bloopers.
Frackin', I'm too tight. Bob Industries. Bob Industries super glue. Mm-hmm. Bob Industries.
Yep, that's all you need to say. You're done.
Yeah, I'm done. That's like, huh. One more time. All right, super glue.
Super glue. That's scat.
That super glue actually builds up, and it can create a fart. I didn't swear. Ha ha ha! Last but not least, good old fashioned fashion. You can even use it